like to welcome you to the Oracle Outlook for the week starting March the 6th, 2017. This is a very special week. I'm very excited to be doing this week's reading, and I'm glad you could join me for this week's reading because Tuesday, March the 7th, is my birthday. This is a momentous occasion because I am celebrating the big 5-0. I'm going to be 50, and I'm really, really excited about it. People are like, why are you so excited? And I'm like, because it's a momentous occasion. You only turn 50 once. So I'm very excited about the idea about reaching, like it's almost like a benchmark kind of thing. So I'm very excited about turning 50. So not just for me, but if anyone else is celebrating a birthday this week, or if you happen to be having a birthday on the same day as me, if you're celebrating your birthday on Tuesday, I want to acknowledge you and say happy birthday. And whatever you have planned for your special day, I hope it is wonderful. So in light of the fact that it's my birthday this week, I'm being very self-indulgent with the choice of deck for this week. This week, I'm going to be working with the Arcana Tarot playing cards. They are by Chris Ovdiyenko. I was hoping I said that right. Ovdiyenko. And they are published by Dead on Paper. That is the company that Chris and his wife Audria have created. So the reason for the deck selection, like I said, is very self-indulgent. I will confess that. This is a very special deck to me. And so if you've been watching my videos for any stretch of time, you'll probably be thinking or saying to yourself or saying out loud, thinking I can hear you, that James, you say that about a lot of the decks that you work with. And that is true to some degree. But this deck really is special, and I'm about to explain why. If you're no stranger to my videos, then you have probably at some point heard me tell the story, my backstory. I'm also a comic book geek, so my origin story, if you follow that, you know, every superhero has an origin. So my origin story about how I got to be a card reader. So a long time ago, this was in 1998, it was, I'll never forget, it was July the 7th, because I remember 7-7. So it was July the 7th, 1998, I had this dream. And in the dream, I was reading playing cards. So similar to the setup I have now, so it was a table where I had a notebook open, and I was taking notes, and I had the cards laid out, and I was doing a reading for myself. And during the process of doing the reading, I had the thought that this is a little bit challenging. And then right after I had that thought, I had another thought that was about sticking with it, you know, being determined and sticking through the process or sticking with it. So I woke up, and the thing that made the dream very significant to me is because I had never in my waking life used playing cards in that way. I didn't even know that playing cards could be used that way. So that was my dream, and what happened was I had a dream dictionary on my bedside table at the time, and I looked up playing cards in the dictionary, and it had said in the entry that playing cards were directly related to tarot cards. And so I had never heard of a tarot card, had never seen a tarot card at this point. So it led me to research tarot, and I want to say about 6 months later, it was in February, so if you do the math, it's probably 6 or 7 months later, I actually got my very first deck of tarot cards. And so somewhere along the line, my dream guides, the universe, wanted to give me another dream as a follow-up. So the follow-up dream was I was in a school, and I'm old enough to say that back in the day, we used to watch movies or films using a film projector. So if you are mature enough to relate to that experience, you'll know what I'm talking about. So we would normally turn out the lights in the classroom and watch the film, right? So it was kind of set up like that. So I was in a classroom, and they were watching a film or a movie, so the lights were out. And I turned to my right, and next to me on my right-hand side, there was like this spotlight on the floor, and there were houses of cards on the floor. So I felt led in the dream to walk over to the houses of cards and start picking up the cards. So I did that, and when I looked in my hands, I had a combination of playing cards and tarot cards. So for me, my takeaway was the school represents learning. So at this point, I was maybe a few years into my tarot experience, you know, my tarot journey, and I was being led to say, like in part of my learning with the cards, I'm supposed to be blending the two different systems. I'm supposed to be blending tarot cards and playing cards. And so that was my takeaway. So when I got this deck, and I just got this deck recently, it was like having that dream come true. You know, Chris, and I emailed Chris and let him know this. This was a very significant deck to have in my collection because it was like combining the two systems in a way for me to work with them cohesively as a whole. So this deck is very special, and that is why. So again, we're going to be using the Arcana Tarot playing cards. They are by Chris Ovdienko, published by Dead on Paper. And so now we'll go ahead and get into this week's reading. And so now I have the deck on the table next to me, so I'm taking the deck in hand. And as I do for every one of my weekly readings, I'm asking the question, I'm setting the intention, I'm getting insight and guidance for the week ahead. Basically, the question in my mind is, what do we need to know about the week ahead? So I'm shuffling the cards. And my head is tingling, so I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Now I'm going to fan out the cards, and I'm going to be picking three. So I'm picking the three that are calling out to me. Now I'm putting the remainder of the deck aside. So now I have the three cards for the week. And I read the cards left to right. So the first card is basically going to either tell us something about the overall theme of the week, or we can look at that as maybe a direct experience we could have at the beginning of the week. So the card is the King of Spades. So the King of Spades is a person card. So when I'm doing readings for the general public or in the general context, like I do here on YouTube, I tend to look at face cards or people cards, which the King of Spades falls into that category. Rather than looking at it as a specific person, I tend to look at them as aspects of ourselves, which comes from my background working with dreams, because rule number one of dream interpretation is that everything in a dream is some aspect of the dreamer. And then as a psychologist, I tend to look at things that we experience as being reflective of ourselves to some degree. So I'm going to adopt that approach with the King of Spades, or the King of Swords, because this is tarot playing cards. So they're assigned either a playing card suit or a tarot suit, depending on the perspective you want to bring to the cards as a reader. So the King of Spades, for me, can represent, spades is the suit that can represent a couple of things. If we go with the cartomancy, the playing card side of it, spades is the suit that can represent challenges, difficulties, obstacles, blocks, hurdles, things of that nature. From the swords perspective, it can represent problems, challenges, but also both sides, regardless of how you look at it. Both sides are encouraging us this week to, if we're facing challenges, if we're facing hurdles, if we're facing obstacles, rather than focusing our energy, our mental energy, because I tend to look at the suit of spades and swords as air, the element of air, and so for me that represents our ability to think, our mental activity, our mental atmosphere, if you will. Instead of looking and focusing on the problem or the challenge, we're being encouraged to look at it from a place of being solution focused or solution oriented. It's about like, what's the solution? How are you going to solve the problem? What decisions do you need to make that are going to help you move from looking at it or just focusing on it as a challenge, and then instead of doing it as a challenge, then how can you do that as a solution or the answer? So instead of focusing on the problem for the problem's sake, how can you be looking for an answer or solution? So that's the suit aspect of it. Kings are all about power, mastery, and control. So sometimes we may look at a problem or a challenge from a place of like, I don't have any power in it, or I don't have any control over it. And to some degree, that may be true if other people are involved. Now, this is a king, so it could be saying too, like, we may have a direct experience with another person, and a king could suggest a man, you know, somebody who's in a position of authority, you know. So sometimes in some experiences, the more people are involved, or even if it's just one person, if another person's involved, then we only have so much control, because we can't control what another person is going to think, say, or do, right? We can only control what we're going to think, say, or do, and how we're going to react and respond to whatever it is that's going on. So, but to some degree, the king is about personal power, self-empowerment. Again, if we go with the idea like this is a reflection of ourselves, we're being encouraged to empower ourselves with our ability to creatively problem solve and use our faculty of decision making, you know, to move us through the week. So I'm taking a step back and asking, what do I need to say about this? So the gist of the card is about, like, what are we going to do when we're faced with a challenge? How are we going to react and respond to it? Are we going to react and respond from a place of feeling like I don't have a lot of power and control? Or are we going to empower ourselves to take the focus off the challenge, off the problem, and become more solution-oriented, solution-focused? So this is what's coming to me in the moment too. This card can also come up when we're looking at issues having to do with judgment or criticism. So this could go one or two ways. Either we're being asked to kind of prepare ourselves, to arm ourselves for possibly being on the receiving end of judgment and criticism. And again, going with what I said about reaction and responding, how are we going to choose to react and respond to someone else's judgments or criticisms? Here's one way that I've gotten through that. Number one, you could ask yourself the challenging question: is the judgment or the criticism, is there some level of truth to it? You may not like the way it's being presented, you may not like the way it's being expressed, but if you take a step back, ask yourself the question, is there some truth to that? And if there is, what are you willing to do constructively with that judgment or the criticism? If it's not true, then why are you allowing it to take up headspace? Why are you allowing somebody else's opinion to be the truth? Because here's the thing, sometimes this card has a reaction. We could want to defend ourselves or defend our position or defend the way we believe or the way we're thinking about something. And here's what I learned about that. When you are quick to want to defend yourself, it's because on some level you are willing to say, to some degree, that the person is right. You know, or that you want to make yourself right at the other person's expense. And sometimes that can work against you. You know, if you know whatever it is that you believe to be true, then it won't matter what other people say about it. It won't matter what their opinions are about it. So that's one way of looking at this. The other thing could be that you are being asked to take a look at the way you might be critical and judgmental of other people. And I'm saying that because I had to learn that myself. I learned that I was judgmental and critical of others because I was so much more so with myself. You know that that saying goes like, you are your own worst critic. That was me. But I also was aware, like, if I was really harsh with my judgments and criticisms to myself, then 9 times out of 10 I was also being judgmental, and critical of other people. So take a look, which side of the line or which side of the lens does that fit for you? But we're all encouraged to take a look at that aspect of ourselves and how it shows up. So I'm seeing that with the King of Spades or the King of Swords. Middle card, we have the 9 of Spades. Okay, so now we have a spade and a spade. So this could be the week where we are really taking a look at what's going on in our mental landscape. You know, what's going on in our head. The 9 of Spades is a card that can suggest sometimes we may be going through an experience where we are imagining the worst possible case scenario. We are jumping to conclusions. We are making assumptions. And if we're making assumptions, and I just had this conversation with someone in relation to the book, The 4 Agreements. You know, Agreement 3 in that book is about not making assumptions. And here's what I've learned. I've learned that for me, in my own personal experience, when I've made assumptions, it's because my mind wants to know something. Our minds always want to have answers. They always want to know what's going on. And so sometimes when we're in a space where something appears to be uncertain, we may create an assumption to fill in that gap of uncertainty. So this card can come up when we may be making an assumption because we need to have information. Now remember, I said swords because this can also be read as the Nine of Swords. Swords is about information. So it could be, instead of creating an assumption, if there is some information that's lacking, because the 9 is about attainment and gaining something, instead of assuming something, it could be, what would you need to do to get the answers? So you know one way or the other, something certain, so to fill in the uncertainty thing. What would you need to know, or what information would you need to have, so that gap can be filled. So I'm seeing that. The other thing with the 9 of Spades could be, if we are facing judgment and criticism from other people, going with the first card, King of Spades or the King of Swords, it could be that we are looking at it, we are worried about what other people think, because this card is about worry, stress, anxiety, things of that nature. So it could be like, if we're feeling the need to be on the defense, it's because on some level there is a sense of worry there. So I'm seeing that with the 9 of Spades. I'm taking a step back to ask what else could I need to say about this. Oh, okay. So there is one other possibility here. I started off by talking about my psych background, my background in psychology. It could be like somebody is being nudged, is the word that's coming to me, but I'm going to say encouraged to maybe pursue psychology. So it could be one or two ways. Either with the King, you're being asked to maybe pursue a master's degree in psychology. Get it? Kings are all about mastery. So somebody watching this video may be encouraged to seek out becoming a master or getting your master's in psychology. I have a master's in psychology, so it could be like, if that's the case, then what is the branch or what is the specialization of psychology that you're interested in? For me, it was health and wellness was my specialization. But this card can also come up when it's about counseling psychology, and so here's the other side of that. So it could be like, maybe you're being encouraged to actually seek out a counselor to work with. I'm seeing in my mind, I'm seeing a conversation that I had with someone recently about a dream. So now this card is also about dreams. This person had a dream about teeth falling out, and the dream was recurring for the person. And so the person, in their note to me about the dream, because they wanted my take on it, was asking me the idea about, because it was recurring, and he had made a statement that he suffers from anxiety. So I was telling him to kind of track the dream, track the dream in the sense of like what's going on in his life every time he has a dream. And so for somebody watching this who's interested in dreams, this might be helpful to you as well. If you're having a recurring dream, you want to track the waking life experiences that may be triggering the dream. But in his particular case, I said to him, once he got an idea of what that was, then that might be, the dream might be responding to the anxiety he's experiencing around that particular waking life event. So yes, so that would be it. So if you're having dreams and they may be inducing a sense of anxiety, or that you are actually going through some sort of anxiety disorder, then these two cards are saying that you may want to seek out the help of a professional with that. So that is the 9 of Spades or the 9 of Swords. So I'm going with that. And now going to the last card for the week, we have, oh, I love this card. Okay, so here we have Judgment. And Judgment is a Major Arcana card. So Major Arcana cards for me carry a lot of weight in a reading when they show up. So the first thing I will say, in light of that last bit I said to someone who may be wanting to seek out a counselor or a therapist in regard to helping them with their anxiety, Judgment comes up when we need to have an evaluation. So it could be somebody is moving through an evaluation process and needing the help of a professional to do that. So I'm seeing that. If that is not for you, Judgment can come up when we are being encouraged to adopt a new lease on life. So the 9 of Spades or the 9 of Swords could be working through whatever it is that we have fears, we have anxieties, we have worries about, especially if we're launching into moving in a new direction in our lives, right? Judgment is about possibly the idea here, and this would make sense with the number 9 coming before it. Judgment is about, seeking out what it is that we feel called or led to do. So the big question, this card is about asking the big questions. And so for me, my big question has always been, what's my life purpose? What am I here to do? And sometimes it comes up when, because I talked about embarking on a new birthday, right? A pivotal time, usually comes up for me like when I hit those benchmark decade years, like when I was 30, I did it when I was 30, did it again when I was 40. And so it could be coming up for me this week as I turn 50. I may be more aware, because I tend to look at this card as being very existential. So I go through a period of existential angst where I ask the big question, like, what am I here for? What's my calling? What am I here to do? Could be like if you're going through a particular experience, especially if it's challenging, with the spades being challenges, especially if it's challenging, then the judgment card as a follow-up is saying there is a point to it. There is a purpose to it. There is a lesson that you are being asked to learn. This card is about, like, if life was a school, then this card is saying we go through testing periods, because this card can be about tests and examinations. We go through testing periods, but they're designed to show us how much we've learned. And the test comes up to show us if we've applied the lessons that we've learned successfully or not. And this card is not like maybe like when I was going to get my psych degree and I had to take my comprehensive exam. It's not like a pass or fail, which was like that setup was for my exam. It's either pass or fail. That's it, right? Life is different. Life will give you the same test again and again and again until you pass it. It's it. And life doesn't judge you. And now that I said the word judge, it brings us right back to what I had said about the King of Swords or the King of Spades, about the idea of looking at the ways that either we are experiencing judgment and criticism, or that the ways that we are being judgmental and critical. It brings us right back here. And so here's the thing. It's designed to show us what's the lesson in that. What do you get out of being judgmental and critical, whether you're doing it to yourself, and 9 times out of 10, if you're doing it to other people, you are doing it to yourself, or whether we're spending time and energy doing that to other people. And how can you change that energy, right? What I did was I learned to train my mind, so when I had a judgmental thought, I caught myself and I asked myself, is that a judgment? And I'm like, James, you're being judgmental. And then I learned, like, sometimes, how can you shift it so it becomes less of a judgment and more of just an observation? The idea here is about practicing emotional detachment. And that was the key. Like, what was my emotional charge to that? And if I had a lot of emotions attached to that, it was a judgment. If I didn't have as much of an emotional charge, or if I didn't have any, then that became an observation. Something for me to just step back and notice, just to be aware. So maybe it's about, like, how can we move this week especially from being judgmental and critical and more of just being an observer. And the way we do that is about looking at the emotional charge. And it's very interesting because there are no cups here. Cups or hearts represent emotions. So with that undercurrent, it's more about practicing the art of emotional detachment. And it is an art. It's something that gets perfected. It's not something that you're going to just say, okay, I'm going to do that, and then get it right the first time or get it right every time. You will have moments where you miss the mark, and it's okay, because like judgment says, you'll get another try. You'll get another test. You'll get another pass at that. So I'm taking a step back and I'm asking, what else do I need to say about judgment? Yeah, so judgment at the end is a big week. So whatever the challenges are, whatever the experience we have, at the end of the week, we're being asked to take a step back and evaluate the experiences and ask ourselves, what do we learn about ourselves as well as other people? Sometimes we have experiences with other people because we need to see something about the other person to make us more aware, and to see if we want to continue engaging in that relationship, in that relationship energy, because the judgment card is 20, and 20 reduces to 2, so that's a number of relationships. We get to choose that. But sometimes we're shown things about people because chances are if we see it that one time, it will show up again. And then we get to choose whether we're going to continue to engage in that, knowing what we know now, right? And then the other thing about that is, what do we learn about ourselves, which is actually the bigger and more important lesson. So on that note, I will wrap up and end this week's Oracle Outlook. So as I close, I'm Jameson Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing space here again with you in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a tarot-tastic week. Take care.